My older sister writes children's books. We brought one of our characters into the real world. My sister Jamie is 4 years older than me and is a children's author and illustrator. She hasn't achieved worldwide fame like Dr. Seuss or Maurice Sendak, as her books have only been released in our state by our local publishers, but she's been able to make a decent living off them anyway. Her books are written in a charming style of prose that appeals to adults just as much as children, and have very pretty illustrations that hit the sweet spot of simple designs that are appealing to look at. Virtually everyone who's read her books enjoys them, and not just her friends and family. Even complete strangers have emailed her with good reviews. I've tried to get my sister to publish her books for a bigger audience via Amazon, but she's decided against it, saying that simple local fame is enough. Her most successful books are the Dusty the Unicorn series. These star a little girl unicorn with a silver coat and blonde mane named Dusty, who goes on various adventures with her friends and learns a different lesson each time. Jamie wrote them because her 6-year-old daughter Alex was going through a unicorn phase at the time, like almost every little girl does at some point, and she wanted something that would appeal to her daughter. One day, Jamie decided to go on a little trip out of town for a week and hired me to stay at her house and babysit her daughter until she returned. I always enjoyed hanging out with Alex, especially when I got to read her mother's stories out loud to her by her bedside. One night, as I was reading her Dusty and the Magic Waterfall, she told me that she would love to meet Dusty in real life. At her age, there isn't much of a difference between reality and fiction, which places such as Disney parks love to take advantage of. I told her that maybe when her mom came back, we could find a way to arrange a visit from Dusty. After Alex fell asleep and I went downstairs to watch Netflix, I brainstormed games that I could play with my niece to make her think Dusty was real. One idea I had was that we could leave apples out during the night, since apples were Dusty's favorite food in the books, and I could take bites out of them to make it look like Dusty had stopped by for a snack. The next day, as I picked Alex up from school, she seemed in a much more joyful mood than usual. I asked her why she was so happy all of a sudden. "Miss Nelson gave me a magic spell to bring book characters to life," she said. I lifted one brow, curious. "Did she?" I said, wondering what kind of game this was. "Yep," she said. "She wrote it down and put it in my pocket. She said to only use it in special times. Well, tonight is a special time, so I'm going to use it to bring Dusty to life." Even though I didn't believe in magic, I was still intrigued by this game and decided to play along. "Okay," I replied. "Well, we can try it out tonight after dinner and see if it works." That night, we set up one of the Dusty books on the floor in the middle of Alex's room. "All right," I said to her. "Now keep in mind it may not work immediately. It may take a while for Dusty to appear." I was thinking maybe I could arrange some sort of surprise, like the aforementioned idea with the apples, while Alex was asleep to make her think it had worked. Alex giggled as she pulled the paper out of her pocket and handed it to me. "Here," she said, "you do the spell." I stared at the text on the paper. It took me a few minutes to figure out how each word was pronounced, since it looked like some sort of weird, unfamiliar language. After practicing each word individually, I recited the whole thing out loud. Once I was done, I stared down at the cover of the book, unsure of what to expect. All of a sudden, I noticed something strange. I rubbed my eyes a few times to make sure it wasn't just my mind playing a practical joke. Nope, I wasn't seeing things. The book was moving. Ripples formed in the cover like it was some sort of liquid before the cover began to bulge outward as if something were trapped inside. Alex grinned and clapped with excitement as I stared with my eyes wide open and my jaw hanging loose, having no idea what to make of what I was seeing. Before I had time to process everything, the bulge on the cover split open, and as if emerging from a womb, out crawled a hideous mockery of my niece's favorite character. I gazed in horror at the creature's round head, which looked like a goat's muzzle had been crudely crafted onto a child's face. Its enormous, bulging, unfocused eyes looked too big for their sockets. It flexed its disgustingly human-like lips before opening its mouth, revealing unsettlingly human teeth and a grotesque tongue 2 sizes too large. Its unicorn horn resembled an overgrown canine tooth that sprouted from between 2 thick locks of its matted mane, which looked like it was hair that had been scalped from a dead child. Instead of hooves, each of its forelegs ended in a rounded stump like amputated limbs. The thing looked more like a botched taxidermy than something that should live and breathe in our world. The creature looked up at me and tried to speak. "Ashaded," it grunted in a voice that sounded neither male nor female. "I should dead him. No. It continued to speak gibberish like a brain-damaged person who had forgotten how to speak. I was unable to say anything. I just stammered my own gibberish in response to this horrible thing's attempt at language. It then turned around to Alex, who had gone pale and was slowly backing away nervously. The creature awkwardly stumbled over to her, continuing to babble its nonsense sounds before my niece squealed in terror, leaping into her bed and pulling her covers over her face. It then turned around back in my direction. "Ejeda, it groaned as it wobbled over to me like all 4 of its legs had fallen asleep. I desperately reached for my pocket knife before flipping it open to the largest blade I could find. Letting out a loud yell, I leaped forward and stabbed the thing in its neck. A thick black ink-like liquid seeped out of the wound, but the injury had no apparent effect on the creature, and it continued to stumble towards me, making those awful sounds. I continued to violently stab it over and over again in any vulnerable areas I could find. Benevolent or malevolent, there was no way I would allow an abomination like this to exist in our world. Soon, the creature fell over on its side, and its gibberish turned into gurgling as it slowly disintegrated into a pile of sand. Gasping big, heavy breaths, I dropped my knife to the ground and stared at what was left of that horrible thing I had just brought to our world, and killed when it was little over a minute old. After vacuuming up the sand, I pulled Alex's blanket away to check on her. Her eyes were sore from crying in terror, so I gave her a great big hug to show her that the nightmare was over. That twisted version of her favorite book character was gone and would never be coming back. We didn't talk much for the next couple of days. Both of us had lost interest in the Dusty the Unicorn books, and she never asked for another bedtime story from me again. My sister came back from her trip, and while I greeted her with open arms, I never told her about the disaster that had occurred. I'm not sure if Jamie ever found out or not, but she did discontinue the Dusty series shortly after that trip in favor of other books. And Alex lost interest in unicorns shortly after the incident. I still have the piece of paper with the spell on it buried in the deepest part of my drawer, but I never intend to share it with the rest of the world as long as I live. Just because something looks cute as a drawing doesn't mean it'll look cute in real life. I don't want anyone making the same mistake I made. I don't want any other abominations like that running around in our world.